Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today, August 21st, the day this video is going live, marks exactly 1 year since I brought home my Crested Gecko, Roger. So, basically a year and 3 weeks since I decided I was into reptiles. I really did jump into the reptile world with both feet. I never really had, not that I didn't have an interest, it just didn't even cross my mind. And then I started looking at them, and I started looking at them more, and I started watching YouTube videos and just reading and all of that stuff, and then I got a Crested Gecko. Like, it really happened very fast, and I have no regrets about it whatsoever, but I really wanted to, on this anniversary, tell you some of the things I have learned in my first year of owning a reptile, specifically a Crested Gecko. A lot of YouTube videos that I have watched, both at the beginning and since, suggest Crested Geckos as kind of the perfect beginner reptile because their care is typically, you know, it's a little less finicky than with some other reptiles, if you will. Like, you don't have to worry about feeding them mice. You also don't have to worry about feeding them salads. You can kind of feed them this pre-made diet and then bugs if you want to. Like, it's a little bit easier. So I didn't really think of that when I got him. I just wanted a Crested Gecko. So I kind of thought that was cool. But I have learned a lot in this first year, so let's get into some of the things that I've learned. So one of the things that I kind of definitely wasn't ready for when I first got a Crested Gecko was the expense up front. Now, a lot of people are, like, a lot of reptile keepers, I guess, are probably thinking, what do you mean expensive front? They're not expensive. It just wasn't something I was really ready for. I mean, I had a cat, and she cost me $25 when I rescued her from the Humane Society. Like, of course I spent more than that on her for, like, food and, like, litter and stuff. But the upfront cost for a Crested Gecko is just more than I thought it was going to be. I paid, I think, $170 for Roger with the Zoom Ed starter kit, which was a sale at the time when I bought it. But then, since then, I've spent so much money on plants and things to make it bioactive and just other sort of decor pieces for in the terrarium. Some of them aren't even in the terrarium anymore, and I bought them. And just so much money on things. Now, I will admit, a lot of those things, like I said, decor items, that's more of a me thing and less of a him thing. I don't think he cares what his branches and that sort of thing in there look like, but I care, and I want it to be pretty. And I've also killed many plants in there, which he probably doesn't care about or doesn't notice, but I notice, so I buy new plants to replace it. Like, that sort of thing. I definitely do think he thrives more in the bioactive terrarium than he does in a non-bioactive terrarium. There's nothing wrong with using fake plants, nothing wrong with not being bioactive, but I have noticed that he just looks like he enjoys it better with real plants and that sort of thing. So I'm glad that I spent the money to go bioactive, and it looks better, but that's an expense that I didn't take into account originally. Do I regret it? God, no. But was it more than I bargained for in the Immortal Words of Fall Out Boy? Yes, it was. But that being said, after the upfront costs, keeping a gecko is a very inexpensive sort of month-to-month cost. All I have to do is occasionally buy crickets. If I wanted to, I could keep tons of crickets and breed them and that sort of thing, but I don't want to do that because I still think they're a little bit creepy. So every 2 weeks, I spend $1 on a bag of crickets from usually the same pet store I got him at, and that's it. He eats them. And even then, I don't always have crickets on hand. I don't always keep them because he is often eating that Crested Gecko diet that you can get from Repashy or Pangea. He does typically seem to prefer the Pangea, which is really frustrating because it's hard to find in stores in Canada. But he does seem to prefer that, so I order that for him all the time. It's not as expensive to keep up with the upkeep of a Crested Gecko as it is to keep up with the upkeep of, like, a cat or a dog, but it was a lot of money up front. Speaking of his food and that sort of thing, when I was first looking at reptiles, a lot of reptiles are insectivores. So I don't like bugs, but it was really something that I was prepared to sort of have to get over. It was the bug thing with Roger, but really, when it comes to Crested Geckos, bugs are just, like, not as important as I thought they would be to begin with. In Canada, you can't get dubia roaches. Those would be, like, the ideal feeder for me, honestly, because I don't find them as gross as I find crickets. They're cleaner, they're easy to breed, like, all that sort of thing. They can't fly. If one got out, you know, I live in Canada, it would die. It wouldn't become, like, an invasive species. But I can't have them, so really all he could eat is crickets, mealworms, and I've tried mealworms and he doesn't want them, so just crickets. And so that being said, I only feed him crickets when I feed him on, like, a Saturday or a Sunday, depending on how the week works out. So only once a week. Other than that, every other day he's getting, like, a mixed food. So I started keeping isopods too because I'm trying to get over the bug thing. So I have a culture of dwarf whites now on top of the dwarf whites that are in the terrarium. I have my Armadillidium Kluge, and then I have crickets. And the crickets really freaked me out to begin with, but you really do sort of get used to it as you go. I still don't love them, but I take like immaculate care of my crickets when I have them. They're in the big container, even though I don't keep a lot of crickets at once. I keep it clean. They have new food all the time, new water. I go through that stuff, you know, fairly quickly, more quickly than I think other people might, but it's because I'm trying to keep like immaculate care of the crickets, because the better they are, the healthier they are, the better they are for Roger, so that's something that's really important to me. But overall, bugs are not as big of a thing with crested geckos as they would be with like a leopard gecko or that sort of thing, something that's an insectivore, and that's kind of something I was preparing mentally for the bugs to be a bigger piece of this than they turned out to be. And with feeding him crickets, I mean, getting the right size cricket is kind of harder than I thought it would be. You know, the typical rule is no bigger than the space between their eyes. Now, some geckos can take bigger crickets, and I've seen Roger take down crickets that are bigger than that, but he does typically seem to prefer the smaller crickets. Like, he would rather have 10 tiny crickets than 2 big crickets, you know what I mean? Because, I don't know, maybe he just finds the larger ones intimidating, or something, but he just does seem to like the smaller crickets better, which is something I had to learn. And another thing I had to learn was that, you know, it's hard for me as a new reptile parent to not want to feed him all the time, because I feed my cat twice a day, and I feed me all the time, and I have to feed the fish 3 times a day. But Roger doesn't want to eat every day, and sometimes he doesn't even want to eat every other day. So if I feed him some of his mixed food, and he doesn't take it out of the bowl, or he doesn't want to eat it, like, I need to learn that that's okay, and that doesn't mean that he's dying, and it doesn't mean he's on a hunger strike. Sometimes he just doesn't want to eat, and that's okay. He doesn't have to eat all the time, and that's okay, because he's not a mammal. So keeping in mind the fact that I don't have to feed him every day, and then sometimes even when I do feed him, he doesn't eat. I mean, realistically, I didn't realize how low maintenance owning a crested gecko was going to be. It's a little bit disappointing, to be honest, because I wanted this like new thing that I could dote over and be just like my natural extra self and be like a hover parent and that sort of thing, and he doesn't need that. Like, I could probably not look at Roger for 2 or 3 days and he would still be fine. He just doesn't need me as much as I thought he was going to, and that's okay, that's fine. It just wasn't something I was prepared for when I first got him. I thought I was going to need to do a lot, because getting a reptile and thinking about all the things that they need, and they need like supplements on their insects, and they need this and that and the other, it seems like it's going to be a lot, but then once you do it, it's really not as much work as I thought it was going to be, and it's a little disappointing, to be honest with you, because I wanted to do more. And in that same vein, if you have a bioactive terrarium, doing things like keeping the humidity up and that sort of thing is so easy. I don't even have to mist the terrarium every day anymore, because the soil, substrate, whatever you want to call it, holds onto it so well, and the drainage layer underneath is like the water kind of drains and then it evaporates back up. Like, I don't have to mist very often because the humidity's up. And I thought that keeping the humidity up was going to be another one of those tasks that was really daunting. I was going to have to spray it like multiple times a day, and who's going to spray it when I'm at work and that sort of thing. And, well, I mean, when I got him, I wasn't predicting a global pandemic, so I didn't think I'd be here every day to check on it as often as I wanted to anyway. But that was something I was worried about, was who's going to spray it down all the time? Do I have to get, you know, a mist king for just one gecko? But you really don't, and when it's bioactive, like, you hardly ever have to spray it, because it keeps its own humidity up, just with the natural, like, ecosystem that you have going on in there. It's so not as much work as I thought it was going to be. But something else that I have learned is that a lot of people think crested geckos don't need supplemental heating, but in my experience, I would rather have it. Now, maybe it's because I'm Canadian, and maybe it's because I'm from, you know, Southern Ontario. It gets hot here. Like, right now, it is hot outside, but it still doesn't get as hot and humid as it does in other places. I know that. And my room especially, like, it's not the hottest place in the world, and I do have an air conditioning. So when I first got Roger, the nice boy that I bought him from at the store told me, you know, I didn't need supplemental heating, that the temperature in there was going to be fine, and I hesitantly agreed. But like a week later, I went and I bought a heat lamp, and he still uses it, because even with the heat lamp, I think the highest temperature I've seen it get to in there was 82 degrees Fahrenheit, which is like a safe hot for a crested gecko. But usually it's about 75 degrees in there with the heat light on, because it's not a very strong heat light. It's the Zoom Ed Nano one, so it's not like meant for a big tank, so it just kind of creates a little more heat in there for him. And that's one of those things that, you know, other people say you don't need. And if I had just kind of gone on what I was learning from when I was researching crested geckos, I probably wouldn't have got a heat lamp. But that was just something that I kind of felt like, if you look at the temperatures that a crested gecko should be kept at, I wasn't keeping him hot enough without the lamp. So that's why I made the decision to buy it, even though I was told so many times that I didn't need it. And I really, it's one of those things that I'm glad I have it. I think Roger's glad I have it. Would he still be alive if I didn't have it? Probably. But I think his quality of life is probably better with it. And that is another thing that I didn't realize about crested geckos before I had one, is that they're a lot tougher than they kind of look like they are. And they're a lot tougher than people give them credit for. I've seen so many videos of people talking about their geckos dropping their tails because something in the room fell over or whatever. But, Roger is a lot tougher than I thought he was going to be. When we take him out, he has free roam of the floor in my room because the floor is pretty open, and my younger sibling and I are both in here. He's supervised, and he just goes, and he just jumps on things with, complete reckless abandon. He just jumps, and his tail is still on, and I have knocked over large things in this room before. There are many loud sounds. There are 2 small yappy dogs in this house, and his tail is still on, and he's just a lot tougher than I would have ever thought. And I've watched him take down crickets that I was pretty sure were too big for him, and I've watched him, it's just one of those things where to look at a tiny baby crested gecko like he was when I first got him, they look really small and delicate, and you need to keep them in your little pocket on your shirt and protect them. But they're a lot tougher than I gave them credit for. Not smarter. I didn't say smarter. I said tougher. Roger is not the smartest creature on the planet. I've watched him try to jump at a cricket multiple times and miss. So it's a good thing he's captive and not wild. But he's definitely tougher than I gave him credit for. Another thing I didn't realize is the kind of slow growers. I kind of expected him to be full grown by a year, but then after I got him, some more research, he won't reach maturity until 3 years. So right now I use he pronouns for Roger, but realistically he's still kind of genderless, and he could end up being a female, which is kind of a fear of mine, because if I end up with my first reptile ever as a crested gecko and it's a girl, I'm gonna have to deal with eggs, and what do I do with the infertile eggs? I just have them. Or do I throw them out? What do I do? What if I So I was really hoping he turned out to be a boy, but I guess it was just something that didn't show up in any of the things that I had read or watched about crested geckos before I had one, was how long it takes them to grow. And he has grown a significant amount from the time I first got him, and I guess maybe it's because I see him every day that I don't notice it, but people who saw him when I first got him and then come over now, or see pictures of him now, they go, oh my god, he's grown so much, but I don't see it because I see him every day. So I guess he has grown a lot, but he's still a slower grower than I thought he was going to be, And then the very last thing that I wanted to mention is that it does truly take time to build trust with a reptile, with any animal really, but I've always sort of had a natural thing with animals. Everybody always says, it takes time for the animal to trust you, but I've always just sort of had a thing where animals are usually afraid of my chair to begin with, but they usually like me just fine. Lena, she took to me right away. Dogs I meet on the street, they just like me. So I kind of just thought that was going to happen with a reptile, and it definitely didn't. I definitely got bit a couple of times when I first got him. It didn't hurt. It's just kind of pathetic. And I couldn't get him to eat from tongs, and I couldn't get him to eat even the mush food off a stick. I couldn't get him to do any of that. On top of that, I would try to take him out of the terrarium, and he would run like he was on fire, and he would just get so mad. So after a year of working with him, and at least sometimes I'll pick him up and I'll just leave my hand with him in a terrarium, or sometimes I just open the door and I just kind of talk at him so he's used to my voice and my smell and all that. After a year, he still doesn't want to be picked up. He still doesn't want to be held. And that's he's a reptile. He doesn't really want people. I understand that, but he's less afraid of me than he used to be. He will let me pick him up. He will eat off tongs. He will eat off a stick, especially if I've mixed his food, whatever's left over on the stick I give to him. He will eat from me now. So it has taken, a year of constant every day or every other day of working with Roger to get him to not hate me. And I'm still not his favorite person. He doesn't have a favorite person. He doesn't like people. But it's taken time, and it will take more time to get him to really chill. But he hasn't really bit anybody since he was brand new here. And he's getting better with people. And it's just gonna keep taking time and keep taking working with him. And I understand that now, and I was really discouraged by it in the beginning, but I understand now that, you know, reptiles, I mean, I've always understood that like a reptile is gonna be a different experience than a cat or a dog, but you really don't understand it or comprehend it until you're in it, until you have a reptile and it doesn't like you, and you're like, I don't understand, like, how do I portray to you that I love you? How do I get you to understand that I'm only here to help you, I'm only here to make your life as great as I possibly can? And that sort of thing does just take a while, and I've had to learn that over the past year of having a reptile, and I think I have learned it, and I will continue to learn it the more I have him. Someday, should I get other reptiles, I would love a bearded dragon. You know, that's something I'm probably going to have to learn from square one all over again, is, you know, approach slowly, understand that it might not love you to begin with, but you can build that sort of relationship with it, you know? And so, yeah, those are just some of the things that I have learned through my first year having Roger. I absolutely adore Roger. I love that I have him. I'm, you know, so glad that I made the sort of random decision last year to get a Crested Gecko. I have no regrets. I love having him. I've learned a lot. I would love to have more reptiles in the future. Not a ton. Maybe just like a couple more. Maybe like another different kind of gecko and a bearded dragon for sure. But it's been a learning experience, and I love Roger. He's a great addition to my little family of animals here. And, you know, he's no bother. I just like him. I think he's cute. And anyway, that's it for this week's video. Make sure you give it a thumbs up and you subscribe to my channel if you've not subscribed already. And I will see you next time. Bye!